Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good night, everybody. I am Emmanuel Bonnet-Jailly. I'm the director of the Borders and Globalization Lab at the University of Victoria. And I would like to acknowledge and respect the Algonquian people on whose traditional territories the University of Victoria stands, and Songhees and Vassanage people whose relationship with the land continues to this day. And say as well that I am a new migrant and a settler in this beautiful land, and I've lived here for a number of years now, and always appreciate and I'm very, very happy to be able to live in this land. I really love this, and always feel very privileged to be working from this part of the world. So this afternoon we have a speaker from the CBSA, and I will introduce Loretta Landmesser a little bit more in a few minutes. But first, I want to ask you all to take a few minutes, as we've done for the previous session, to introduce yourself and to basically do as you've done in the past, talk very briefly about what organization you work for and where you are basically connecting from. We have 3 speakers in the room, and we have, I think, 11 or 10 or 11 online. So I will start with the speakers online. And maybe we can start right away with David Monti, because you're at the top of my screen, David. Please take the floor, David. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Loretta. I'm David Monti. I'm the head of a digital agency in Vancouver, Canada. We work on a number of web products, and some of which are related to border and international issues, and I'm here to learn more about that. Before I hand off, I like your photo in the background. I'm going to guess Lilloit Lake. No?
Close. It's Butte Inlet, so just north of Vancouver. If you think of Campbell River, directly across from there on the mainland.
It's a wonderful shot. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're going to go to Karen, and then Preeti, and then Lauren and Camila. Karen, please take the floor. Introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Mayer Benitez, and I work at the headquarters of the CBSA. I'm an editor of ministerial correspondence and briefing notes, and I'm really interested in your talk today because my shop often consults with yours on correspondence that's from Indigenous individuals, stakeholders, and correspondence from anybody about Indigenous issues. So I'm very happy to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. The floor is yours, Preeti. Take the floor.
Yeah. Hi, this is Preeti Chaudhary. I'm Commissioner of Customs in Government of India and currently looking after the portfolio of food safety and standards through the importation in India and all its domestic manufacturing and other sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Preeti. We're going to Lauren. Lauren, please take the floor.
Hello, Loretta. My name is Lauren. I apologize. I would turn my camera on. I'm using a personal laptop that doesn't have like a really good camera. I'm with Canada Border Services Agency in Prairie Region out of Manitoba. I work in our Trade Operations Division as a manager, and I've been with the agency for 24 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And we're going to Camila.
Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, Loretta. I'm Camila Vovitz. I work for the Canada Border Services Agency in the GTA region. I'm the Assistant Director at the Intelligence Section. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Camila. We're going to Ben P. Benjamin Perrier.
Hello, Loretta. Nice to meet you. I'm Benjamin Perrier. I'm a researcher on law of borders with Emmanuel Bonnet-Jailly, and I'm a part of the Borders and Globalization project. Nice to meet you, Loretta.
Thank you very much, Ben. We're going to Umberto Larco. Umberto, please take the floor.
Hi, Loretta. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you. My name is Humberto from Peru. I am a custom officer at the Peruvian Customs. Currently, I work at the International Customs Division, where I'm responsible for negotiating and monitoring bilateral commitments, international treaties. In custom matters, I also have experience working at the airport, and I used to work in a free trade zone in southern Peru, bordering with Chile. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Humberto. Muchas gracias. Now we go to Paula Malespina. Paula, take the floor, please.
Hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Paola Malaspina. I'm originally from Italy. I'm a custom officer from Italian Custom Administration. I currently live and work in the United States. I'm seconded to the Italian consulate in Houston, Texas, where I deal with the second and third generations Italians and the Italian heritage. Thank you so much.
Grazie mille. Thank you very much, Paola. Now we are going to Paula Landesma. Paula, take the floor, please.
Thank you. Hello, Loretta. I'm Paula. I work for the Argentinian Customs Organization as a technical advisor. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. We go to Cynthia Pai. Please take the floor, Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Pai. I am an acting director of Indigenous Affairs. I work with Loretta here at Canada Border Service Agency in Ottawa, Canada. And I am just here as an observer today. Thanks.
Delighted to have you, Cynthia. Thank you very much. And we are going to Luis Guerrero. Luis Guerrero, please introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Luis Guerrero. I'm from Mexico, and I'm an international trade student. And right now I'm doing some research at University of Victoria.
Okay, so now in the classroom, we can start with Avani. Avani, please introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Avani. I came from Sri Lanka. I work for the Department of Sri Lanka Customs. Currently, I'm working for the directorate known as Industries and Services, which does close collaboration with trade and customs. I'm one of the officers in charge of one of units there.
Thank you so much, Avani. We go to Emma.
Hi, Loretta. My name's Emma. I'm a master's student here at the University of Victoria in the Department of Geography. And I'm looking forward to your talk. Thank you for being here.
And then Onome.
Hi, Loretta. My name is Onome. I'm also a master's student here at the University of Victoria and a research assistant working with the Big Lab. Nice to meet you.
And unless I have missed somebody online, please raise your hand or let me know by taking the floor. I think I've introduced everybody. Okay, so today I am really delighted to have Loretta. Loretta, I want to thank you personally because it was my dream to have people from your unit 2 years ago, and then this year you agreed to basically step in and join us, and I'm very, very grateful for this. Loretta Landmesser is a wolf clan of the Chemalku Omalco First Nation, a Coast Salish nation known as the people of the fast-running waters. I am not going to go in the detail of her training and where she comes from, but I want to say that she's been with the Canada Border Services Agency since 1999. So she is your among a peer, and she's been working on the issues that she's going to discuss with you for a very long time. She has tremendous experience in this regard, and I am delighted because there are so many places across the world that are a little bit like what Loretta is going to discuss today, which is situated in Canada, obviously, where you have First Nations that have historical relationship to the land that obviously are much more old and much older than the boundary lines that divide them. And it's not just in Canada that we have this situation, but when you look at, for instance, the work that we've done in Big Lab, in the Borders and Globalization Lab at UVic, you know, there are dozens of situations in Canada, between Canada and the US, and other parts of Canada with Europe, or Denmark, and so on and so forth, but also in Latin America, in the US and Mexico, and then across Latin America and Asia, and then obviously in Australia and New Zealand in the Australasia. So it's a very important topic to realize how poorly managed, in a way, those relationships have been as a result of colonization, very often violent. Today, they are not violent relations in many countries, but they remain violent in a lot of countries and way too many. So it's a very important topic for two fundamental reasons. One is that managing our relationship peacefully is actually a huge economies of scale, both for states, regional governments, and colonizing states in a way, but also for the local nations themselves that have suffered from this situation for many years, sometimes 10, 12 generations. And so that's one of the things. And the other reason is that we have in the Borders and Globalization Lab collected, for instance, the instances of violent situation in border regions. And unfortunately, today, it is still the #1 cause of war. And so these situations that are poorly managed are really important to understanding this, these cases of borders, boundaries, and how organizations such as custom and immigration can actually contribute to a much better management of these issues. So first, look at this from a Canadian perspective. Thank you so much, Loretta, for doing this with us today. And with that, the floor is yours. Take us away. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So certainly commonplace, and just want to express my appreciation to everybody for your participation in in today's session. Just really humbled to be here, and certainly no surprise to folks who work in the customs and trade space that some of the first questions that we ask is anything to declare, and certainly has a different connotation when we talk about Indigenous perspectives. So just to help situate us and where I'm coming from. So I'm Coast Salish. I'm from the Homalco Territory and just up in the Butte Inlet area, just north of Vancouver by a few hours. But the complexity of borders, and here you'll see a snapshot of what we call North America, the complexity and overlaying layers of Indigenous nations, and that Canada, as one example internationally, it's the international border that was created both between Canada and the United States, now with also an international boundary between Canada and Denmark, with the recent treaty in terms of Hans Island, or Tortupaluk. The creation of international borders, although is earlier referenced a lot through violence, also continues to have a notion of fear crossing the border, fear for maintaining familial connections, fear for continuing to reintegrate and reestablish culture, those kinship ties, the ability to build languages across borders, the management and enforcement of international borders and organizations like the Canada Border Services Agency plays. It has a real impact on communities. And that is something that we need to consider as organizations and working in these spaces, is just that though they may have been created oftentimes in very violent circumstances, the ongoing impact and legacy of those situations still to this day remains. The fear and trauma that took place at the time continues. We've heard many reflections of that in the work that my team is responsible for, and then I work with Cynthia around. So, not wanting to go over too much in terms of what's on the slide, but just some of the different things that we think about in the customs and trade related space. And certainly some of the things that we're exploring a little bit more in terms of the complexity would be around the classification and evaluation of Indigenous cultural items, how duties and taxes might not apply to the movement of Indigenous cultural items, the role of organizations and agencies like law enforcement, for instance, Canada Border Services Agency. And I know there was an earlier session this week related to the trafficking in cultural heritage items as well, and certainly the perspectives of Indigenous people on that. And then the considerations around economic reconciliation and the interests that Indigenous communities have in and around enabling greater economic development opportunities within their communities, and the role that organizations, different perspectives have in advancing some of those opportunities. And so I think just really sort of interesting reflections on where these different topics can go and the depth, breadth of what the activities are in a customs and borders and trade related space. And then some of the most deeply meaningful work that I am fortunate to be a part of in my day-to-day activities, which are repatriation and rematriation activities. And so kind of just to help situate folks in just where the CBSA is coming from, the Indigenous Affairs Secretariat only been around for just over 6 years. And we recently just came out of a series of consultations that were national in scope, and it relates directly to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the adoption of that piece of international framework into Canada's laws in the UN Declaration Act. And so as we, as part of the federal family, look to how we are going to implement that and look to examples both within Canada in terms of how British Columbia, as an example, has implemented it. Also look to international areas as well for some guidance, but really critically looking at our own internal departments to see how we can advance the implementation of this. We noted that there are some very unique challenges around the border and the mobility of Indigenous nations, reflecting back on that first image that I shared with the overlapping nations and just the degree to which the border impacts the movement of people. It also impacts the movement of their goods. And sometimes that's those are cultural goods, and sometimes they're just the regular things that folks would buy on a regular basis. And the importance of having a reflection on that actually drove us to do some consultation. And so there are very specific legal parameters around who has a right to enter Canada in our existing laws as a country. And those don't necessarily align to the groups of Indigenous people that Canada recognizes it under its constitution. It also doesn't reflect any consideration for the how the border was applied across those communities, and then how we might reconcile that in today's circumstances. So we partnered with our colleagues at Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, and we negotiated an action plan measure for inclusion into Canada's UN Declaration Act action plan. Action plan measure is quite specific in terms of making reference to the Immigration, Refugee Protection Act and specific provisions in it around the movement of people. But it also was a bit more broad in terms of looking at opportunities where we can consider other aspects that is very intricately tied to the movement of people. And so undertook those consultations starting in October of last year and went right through February of this year. And the purpose of these consultations was to better understand and sort of revalidate some of the existing work that had already been done, and also to build on it as well, so that we could really start to advance and look at, well, what do we have within our existing policies and procedures that could be changed or shifted, or what do we actually need legislative change for? And so we're just now taking a period of reflection, having received all of that information, and we're sort of looking at opportunities to prioritize it, but that's sort of like what situates ourselves in this work. And I had mentioned a bit about the repatriation, and to unpack that a little bit, because it might not be intuitive in understanding. But you think about internationally and what imperialism was and what colonialism was and some of the activities associated with that, it actually resulted in the oftentimes forcible taking of Indigenous cultural items, totem poles, regalia, other cultural items, things that have deep spiritual, cultural significance for communities, and sort of parsed out across the globe. A lot of those holdings had, been throughout Europe and elsewhere. In many cases, sometimes private holdings, those things made themselves into being held by individuals that have been since passed down maybe a generation or two. And these items, these are parts of culture. These are, in many cases, in some cultures, considered still to be living things. And so the ability for us to be able to play a role in this type of work is, I would say, very, very important, very meaningful, and it's also become a source of pride for folks who are able to be involved in the repatriation and rematriation work. But it's really in supporting communities in their return of these items. But when we think about all of the different layers of complexity that exist, when these items were taken or removed from their communities and parsed out in various parts of the globe, it wasn't done likely in accordance with maybe the customs regulations and frameworks in place at the time. Certainly now we have, in a more modern context, we have laws that govern policies that sort of enable us to more carefully consider the different impacts that the movement of cultural and heritage related items over a certain age, that's governed now with a bit more diligence. Certainly wasn't at the time. But now when we work with communities to bring those parts of their culture and their communities back home, well, there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy that is involved in that, and it's not an easy task. And so it also implicates a number of government departments. For instance, it includes Canadian Heritage as an example. It also could, depending on the different items, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, as well as Environment Canada, various different departments that are impacted by the work in the space of repatriation or rematriation. And then we think about the customs tariff itself. There are no unique provisions within the customs tariff in our harmonized system to be able to actually properly attribute these items. Because I think if you think about a totem pole, for instance, certainly it's carved out of wood. And I think of my own culture, and I think, well, we carve everything out of cedar. Cedar is our lifeblood. And so if you can certainly quantify and identify the HS classification, the harmonized system classification for cedar products, and you can follow that route down and be able to fill out your customs paperwork accordingly. But is that truly what that item is? It's a totem pole and has a living spirit and is a living being. And the current systems and procedures and protocols that we have in place it doesn't incorporate an Indigenous worldview applied to it. And the systems have been designed around Western views and Western methodologies around how we conceptualize those things. How do we conceptualize how things are classified, how things are valued? And those are all important pieces that we need in terms of processing these items or cultural objects or regalia or grandmothers and grandfathers when we talk about totem poles. Those are things that don't nicely align when we're trying to sort of find a way for the two to reconcile. it's certainly very challenging. But when we do consider the application of different acts of parliament or different laws and regulations that govern these types of activities, very challenging. And it's challenging both internally to try to figure out how to support the activities. You can imagine and appreciate how challenging it is on the other side of that, on the behalf of the communities that are working in this space. So some of the things that we're quite fortunate to participate in. This one, actually, Cynthia was there with me, as well as we had other colleagues, Indigenous colleagues, participating in this, but it was the rematriation of Nisga'a-Lism's memorial pole. This was being returned from Scotland, massive memorial pole in terms of its size. It required cooperation with Canada's Department of National Defence. You'll see one of the large air carriers here. These were images that were taken and are available online. But the sheer size of the memorial pole required a lot of complex navigation. So you think about the process of supporting delegations of Indigenous nations overseas. From a Canada Border Services Agency perspective, we have liaison officers who are posted abroad and who are able to provide support to local customs services for those individuals who might be traveling with regalia, they may be traveling with medicines, and wanting to find ways to support the smooth passage of those individuals overseas and during what is a very stressful and difficult time. And so we did to our liaison officer network to be able to support some of that facilitation, working with local customs services of jurisdiction. And so on the return of this memorial pole, so there's a lot of prep work involved. This took months in terms of organization. And it was led by the Nisga'a-Lism's government through their museum. And so you'll see Department of National Defence staff on board the aircraft. So the aircraft flew from Scotland to our Canadian Forces base in Trenton, Ontario. And I have to pause for a moment because it was very deeply overwhelming for me. So Nisga'a territory is just a little bit further north of where my territory is, and have been working off and on with Nisga'a for a number of years. And so the ability to participate in this particular rematriation of this grandmother was quite humbling. And so I appreciate your patience with me as I scroll through the pictures. But here you see the grandmother just getting ready for loading into the aircraft. And so here's where the pole had been packaged up. You'll see the cedar boughs that are laying on top of the boxes. So one of the restrictions, of course, it would have been protocol for Nisga'a to bring cedar boughs from their territory that's located on the west coast of British Columbia. It would have been protocol for them to bring the cedar boughs with them. Of course, cedar bough is restricted in terms of their transport into another country, and they were not able to bring cedar boughs. So they actually had to source cedar that is native to Scotland and managed to find some, and were able to place those cedar boughs actually on the crates just to help provide that layer of protection and insularity for the grandmother on her return. You'll see the additional images showing that. So there's a lot of work and effort in moving. And so boarding some of the pieces onto the plane for transport, and then also moving them off on arrival into Trenton, Ontario. And you'll see I'm here with one of our Indigenous colleagues here at the agency. I actually harvested cedar boughs from my backyard in order to bring with us to CFB Trenton to lay those cedar boughs on the crates of the memorial pole. And what a deeply moving experience that was on her arrival back into Canada. and then getting her ready for her trip I think within about a week and a half or so, her trip out, back out to her territory, Michelle Lison's territory. So
Loretta, the floor is back to you. Thank you so much for that video.
thanks. I'm glad it ended up working out, and just wanted to, I would have been remiss if I hadn't have been able to share the video, because it's a beautiful piece that our communications area worked on. And so one of the folks in the video, John Bay, so he's a regional Indigenous Affairs advisor that works for our team, and he helps support just helping us better understand the unique Indigenous considerations as it relates to sort of the work that we do day to day at the border. And so we did a lot of work around that. And so all of the different touch points on repatriation, I think really, and rematriation activities really highlights the need to consider how Western perspectives very much informed how border management and enforcement activities developed, how they gave rise to the creation of laws and regulations and policies and procedures. And country is different in that regard. Each country has its own different legislative and regulatory framework that it exists under. And I would say, oftentimes Indigenous perspectives weren't considered in that. And it is a beautiful opportunity now that Canada has to consider more comprehensively how Indigenous perspectives are considered in the space of, border management and enforcement. As much as we want to facilitate, we still have our day-to-day job to do, and we want to ensure that we are protecting Canada and, the different ways that we do that. How can we do that and at the same time help all of these different elements that are associated? How can we start to integrate in a different way the different aspects of Indigenous perspectives, whether it's on value for duty, or when we think about the different provisions within tariff, all of the different other regulatory parameters and regimes that could also apply. But it just really gives us an opportunity to be able to do that. And so I see there's a question in the chat from Ivani, just about not having an HS classification for every good that can be classified under a particular HS code. So there's, I guess, to explain that a bit more, and I'll go back to the example I was using of the totem pole. So see something that's carved from cedar, it could be classified as an item that's, you drill it down, it's an article of cedar, it's been manufactured or prepared in some fashion. And that could apply to anything that sort of meets those sets of criteria for how that classification is described. That's not necessarily like that. That's a Western application of how that item is viewed. It doesn't consider the perspective of the community in it being that is, in the Inishka memorial pole instance, that's a memorial pole. It's a grandmother. It's a living and breathing thing. And it's a person, it has a spirit, it has to be nurtured, and all of these different things. There's no way to quantify that in the HS classification system. And so although there is a technical way of being able to do that, and we had to do that in the instance of the facilitated return of the Nishka memorial pole, we had to complete the necessary customs documents. Or we didn't, but the Nishka government did. They provided, the extent to which we could provide guidance in that regard. We had to find a classification that fit the circumstances, but it didn't actually respect the community's view of what that item was and the significance that it has. And so there's the worldview it's hard to reconcile in that instance. And we see that particular for other cultural items that are coming into Canada from elsewhere, particularly those items that are regulated like feathers or have other animal or types of parts to them, other types, things that could be included within regalia, for instance. And so it's wanting to try to find a way to properly classify something that could be, whether it's a broader, perhaps like under the headings level, for instance, something that could include a provision for regalia or these types of cultural items when they're returning in a way that meets the needs of communities, better reflects the respect that needs to be accorded, while at the same time still enabling us to be able to quantify that and use that classification within our system, give us a better in our systems, but give us a better way to track the number and measure volumes and be able to gather data from those items returning in a different way than we currently do, and enables us to make and develop different types of programming to be able to support that. So it's an excellent question, Avani, and I hope that I've answered it. But happy to start shifting into the practicum if that's a good moment in time to shift, but happy to take other maybe questions before we do so.
There's one more from Paula.
Paula, you should take the floor and then state your question, please.
Oh, yes. First of all, thanks for the presentation. I'm from Europe, so this has sounded extremely new and interesting to me. And the first question is, apologies for my ignorance, the difference between rematriation and repatriation.
No, thank you for the question, Paula, and should have actually clarified that when I mentioned it earlier at the first outset. So the difference there, and we take our cues from the communities that we work with when how they want to describe their activities. So we, for the most part, we'll look at it from a repatriation perspective. They are repatriating, and the word, it's in a verb format, to repatriate is to return something to its country or home of origin. And as we've developed a better, different understanding of that activity, in some instances it's not appropriate terminology to use, and because it's considered by some communities at least to be tied into a patriarchal system, and so not all communities are organized patrilineally. For some communities, matriarchal systems or matrilineal systems of community organization, sort of following that line of thought. Not all things that are being returned to their communities are male, or that sort of that male spirit wouldn't apply to them. And in those instances, we need to refer to them as like rematriations. And so in the context of the memorial Pole's return to its home, Nisga'a territory, she's the grandmother. We had teachings that were shared with us through the course of all the preparations for that particular return, is that she is a living and breathing grandmother, and so has to be cared for in a particular way and accorded the due care and love and attention on her return to her home as was needed. But to refer to that group of activities as being rematriation because she's a grandmother. Appreciate the opportunity to clarify that.
Thank you so much.